All right, everybody. It looks like we got the majority of people joining in. We got a good group, so thank you very much for taking the time today. Let me just pull up the slide here. So my name is Michael McGuire, and I'm here with my colleague Ajay Kaushik. We're from Stinson ITS, and if you're not familiar with our company, we're a value-added reseller of a wide variety of traffic technology, including sensors, central software, intelligent warning systems, and smart work zone technology. So we're going to begin hosting monthly webinars on interesting traffic topics, this being the first of them. So our intention is to keep them short and sweet and focused on innovations and trends we see in the industry. So we hope you'll join us for some of our feature ones. But today we're here to talk about traffic data collection, how and why it's performed, as well as how that's changing over time with technology, and especially during these COVID restrictions. So brief overview of the agenda for today. We're going to start with a little preface of why we did this. Then we're going to jump into the actual survey itself. Oh, and I'm clicking best. So we're going to look at the survey process and results, then the insights we gained from the results, and then jump into some specific use cases and case studies of how specific customers are actually using data, both in general as well as during COVID. So why this market research? When the shutdown began, we began producing impact analysis reports for customers, showing them the drop in traffic caused by the shutdown, as well as the change in the mode of transportation we saw. This data mostly came from mile-vision systems we had permanently installed at intersections, but also from radar count stations and travel time systems. Now, the feedback we got from customers was extremely positive, and they started asking for more and more data. And we quickly realized that they don't have as much data as we thought they did. And this is primarily because they don't have permanent count stations. And it got us wondering, what do they have? And that's where the idea for the survey came up. So we asked customers, oh, I'm being told that you guys can't see the whole thing. Hopefully that's working now.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So we started wondering, what data do customers have? What stations do they have out there? And that's kind of what inspired the idea of this survey. So we asked customers, what do you collect? How do you collect it? And how often? Now, you guys are in the industry. The answers aren't going to surprise you, but we did gain some interesting insights in regards to trends within the industry, as well as specific case studies on how cities are doing it right now, which we'll get into a little bit later. We also asked customers how they're using data in the lockdown and found some interesting use cases there as well. And I'll talk briefly about some of the responses we've seen, in the short term for COVID, and then I'll pass it on to look at the survey results. So in talking with customers, it seems like there's three primary use cases for big data during the lockdown. The most prominent case by far was the loosening of restrictions around construction work, allowing hours of operation as well as the size and duration of lane closures to be expanded heavily in response to the reduced traffic volumes. And we also saw temporary bike lanes and widened sidewalks be created in order to accommodate social distancing, to make that a little easier. But more than anything, just to accommodate the massive increase in bike traffic. Through all the data analysis that we did, we saw about a 400% increase in bike traffic across all the various analysis we did. And it's not surprising considering people's fear of public transport and taking taxis and rideshare and things like that. And probably the second most prominent use case we saw was just a demand for more data and more reporting. Now, it's easy to look outside and drive down the road and know that it's less busy than it normally is. But unless you have data that's been collected over time, you don't have anything to compare to. So it's hard to qualitatively say, how much has traffic reduced? And when it starts to come back, how much is it coming back? And so we're seeing more and more traffic agencies relying on that count data to measure the decrease, as well as, more importantly, the return to normal as we move through different stages of the reopening. So those are the three main use cases we came across during our survey. We'll talk a little more in detail when we get to the case studies later on, but I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Ajay now, who performed the survey. He's going to discuss the results and some of the insights we gained throughout it.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm Ajay here. I conducted the survey and analyzed the results. We sent the survey request to about 436 individuals from traffic departments in Ontario, and 26 of them responded, and we interviewed 26 of them. 26 participants represented cities, counties, and towns, as you can see from the data here. During the surveys, we realized that farming towns and tourist towns have similarities in terms of needs for the way they think about data. So we decided to separate them. About 35% of these towns were farming towns, and 23% of these towns were tourist towns. Overall, we also had a good spread of different titles of participants. As you can see, that directors, managers, and technologists were most interested in responding to this survey. So one of the first questions that we asked was, how important is traffic count to your role and to your department? And about 40% of the respondents mentioned that traffic counts are very important to them. We also had 20% respondents who told us that this was not at all important to them. And when we analyzed further, we realized that most of these participants were from very small towns, 2 of them coming from towns which didn't even have a single intersection. The second question that we asked all the participants was, what is the frequency of traffic counting in your town? And again, we had a very wide range. We got very mixed responses from participants, mentioning a range of frequencies from never to everyday traffic counts using permanent count stations. And all 4 of these permanent count stations were cities. But then during our discussions, we realized that most of them were in favor of doing more traffic counts every year, and maybe twice a year, thrice a year, so that they can have data which they can present to other stakeholders within the city. I'll move on to the next slide. So the third question that we asked was, what kind of traffic counts do you conduct within your city? And as you can see in this graph 3, a large number of traffic departments still conduct 24-hour ADT studies because that's the norm. And probably they're still very old school, but a lot of other customers have started doing 3-day counts or 7-day counts because especially in the recent years, there has been a need to understand traffic data in more detail, such as AM and PM peaks during weekdays and weekend traffics. So a lot of customers are moving towards 7-day counts, and all the cities, they were already doing everyday counts, especially for all major arterial roads and important roads. There were still some customers who said, hey, we only do 8-hour counts, once in the spring, once in the autumn. So the fourth question that we asked was, what kind of traffic technology do they use for traffic counting? Although loops are the largest deployments on roads, the survey pointed that they're not very popular for traffic counting. They are out there on the roads, but they're not really connected, and not many people are relying on them for the data. Radars are the most popular, followed by manual counting through outsourcing. The cities, especially, we can see that there's a trend for use of camera-based traffic, bike, and pedestrian counting. LiDAR is also a very new technology. A couple of different places where they are trying LiDAR technology to count bikes and pedestrians on active transportation roads. So the last question that we really asked was, what is the biggest traffic challenge before and after COVID? Speeding. It remains the biggest traffic challenge. In fact, after COVID, because the congestion has reduced, the speeding complaints from residents have increased. Tourist towns also report that the weekend traffic has increased, especially in June and early July. Some smaller towns reported erratic driving, which was very strange for them and very strange for us, where they said residents of the towns were no longer using the main roads. They were trying to use interior roads so that they can avoid traffic, and they can avoid getting in contact with others. So this is the results of the survey. We tried to find what were the common insights or what are the common trends from this survey that we could find. And after talking to 26 people, we realized that overall, everybody wants more data collection, including towns which don't really have an intersection. They have never done a traffic counting earlier. They still want to do more data collection. There's also a trend where people want to use better technology, more reliable technology, and they especially prefer non-intrusive technology. And once they get this data, they all want to analyze this data. For example, in cities, all the cities have higher budgets compared to towns, so they tend to go towards permanent count stations, especially on arterial roads. They have very specialized workforce. They always have teams to collect data, and they have a different team to analyze this data. Some of these teams, and I'll cover this in case studies later, where they used a Microsoft Azure platform and R programming to do analytics and share this data with other departments. Towns, in general, they have much lower budgets. They prefer to use temporary count stations, which means they carry small portable radars to different locations in different weeks and conduct studies, come back, download the data, and then analyze it. It's very interesting to see that a lot of these towns were using the radar devices not only for traffic counting, but mainly for speed measurements so that they can validate the speeding complaints by residents around them. Also, we talked to a few road supervisors who are now learning Excel sheet and graphing in Excel sheets, after being in the service for 20 plus years. And that was very interesting to know that they want to do more data analysis, not just collect the data. I'll pass it to Michael now to talk about more trends.
Thanks, Ajay. So as far as the technology used and the trends we see there, there's a number of factors. So part of it is the type of sensor that's used, and then also how it's deployed, temporary or permanent. But it's also important to look at connectivity and how the data collection occurs. And with that comes data management and just how do you keep track of so much data. So when it comes to sensors, the overwhelming trend is towards non-intrusive sensors like radar and video. And we see this both for permanent and temporary counting. And we're told this is primarily because it's safer to use, as no one needs to go onto the road to deploy them, and also because they can work in all weather conditions. We also see trends in the deployment strategies that are used. Cities that typically relied on temporary counts are moving now towards permanent count stations. Good examples of this are the city of Brampton and Ottawa, which are moving in this direction. As for data collection and management, I'm clicking too much. So as for data collection and management, this is actually an area we see a lot of change. With the cost of cell data plans dropping so much in the last few years, remote data collection has become very affordable. So instead of driving out the site and manually collecting data from a sensor, you can sit at home or at the office and download the data from your desktop. And even better, we see a lot of cities adopting central or cloud-based software. And with this approach, the data is actually uploaded constantly and automatically. So all you have to do is log onto the software to download or view the data you're after. So on this next slide, we put together a comparison chart on the various technologies used to collect data and kind of the pros and cons of each. We're not going to go into extensive detail on this slide, but we have included it with the presentation so that you can review it later in more detail. Now I'm going to pass it back to Ajay, and he's going to discuss some of the specific use cases we came across in particular cities and customers.
Thanks, Michael. So I have about 5 minutes to finish this. We basically interviewed about 15 towns, and 6 of them were tourist towns. Grimsby is an example. They primarily use traffic data to measure tourist traffic and commuter traffic. And they had a huge drop of traffic. About 20% of normal traffic is what they experienced after COVID, immediately after COVID. But now the traffic is back up to about 80% of the traffic before COVID. They use portable radar sensors to measure volumes on major arterial roads, but they're also very interested in measuring bikes and pedestrians using LiDAR technology on active transportation routes. The biggest issue that they see during COVID was speeding complaints by residents. And the issue was similar for the farming town of Bayham, where again, there were speeding complaints, but also there was erratic driving, which I talked about earlier, where residents are avoiding major roads during lockdown. Bayham was a very unique town for us because they were actually using a radar to measure or to validate the speeding complaints by the residents. And significant number of there was a significant number of farming vehicles on the road, and we could see that there was a high risk of collisions and intersections. That was another issue that they talked about. So moving on, let's compare cities, and these are two cities which lead the data in Ontario. In terms of city of Ottawa, they have 60 camera-based counting stations, 30 portable counting radars, and they collect this data. They do almost 3,000 different analysis on locations per year, and they do this using some of these portable counting radars. They have a team of 6 people who carry these portable counting radars in different places. They put them there for 3-day counts or 1-day count or 24-hour counts, and get these back to their office, download the data, recharge those radars, and then put them back. They also use Excel and DES software to analyze some of this data. For COVID-19, they installed temporary counting stations, 7 camera-based counting stations on intersections, which were geospatially located across the city of Ottawa. And they also put 10 bike and pedestrian counting stations. So how did they really use this data? They basically use this data to monitor traffic volumes and approve road construction project work, especially during morning and evening peaks. Something very unique from City of Ottawa was they observed a midday spike of about 30% higher traffic than pre-COVID levels, especially between 11:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. in high commercial corridors. And after some investigation, they think it's because a lot of people are working from home now, and they go out during lunchtime for takeaways and doing the shopping during those times. Something very unique. It's no use case, but it's interesting to know this is happening there. 30% extra traffic. Region of Peel, we think they're a leader in this. They have 32 radar-based permanent count stations. They have 3-day traffic counts based on other different radars, which are portable radars. But they were the best in terms of using Azure platform, Microsoft Azure platform, and R programming to analyze the data and compare it from last 4 years. So they have these 32 permanent count stations from almost 4 years. So they have all the data that they need to benchmark post-COVID data. So this is a graph that they generate, and they have been generating this every week ever since COVID has happened. And you can see how the 0% is a benchmark from last year and how the traffic has gone down immediately after Government of Ontario declared emergency at this point of time, and how it has been slowly coming up. So it's really interesting to see that. And they have authorized longer hours on road construction projects based on traffic data from different locations. And they've also shared this data with Mayor's office for different announcements, after COVID. So that was really interesting. Let me pass this to Michael again, who will talk about MTO.
Thanks, Ajay. So yeah, on this last slide, we're going to be talking about the MTO and the Finch LRT construction project. So the MTO is by far the largest data collector in Ontario and probably Canada. They have a wide network of radar and loop-based count stations on all major highways in Southern Ontario. They have over 3,000 ITS count stations, which are a combination of loop and radar-based stations, as well as what are called inventory count stations. And they have about 400 of those. And these are just loops in the ground that terminate at the side of the road, but don't actually go anywhere. And what they do is every 2 years, they'll come by, they'll hook up a data collector to these loops, collect data for 2 weeks, and then return to site, pick up the data collector, and that will be their ADT or their intermittent counts. But as the cost of radar count stations is coming down heavily in the last few years, They're actually replacing these as they're newly built by permanent cloud-connected count stations. So they're going to be having continuous data coming in from all of these stations eventually as well. The MTO has been extensively using data during COVID to provide reports to the directors as well as a number of other departments. And this data is primarily being used to measure the growth in vehicle traffic in order to track, the percentage of return to normal they're seeing as each phase of reopening is happening. Now the Finch LRT is an interesting case. Stinson was actually awarded the Smart Work Zone contract for this project. And we've deployed a travel time advisory system across the entire work zone, as well as a number of CCTV cameras and a wireless internet network to provide 24-hour streaming of HD video for remote monitoring of the work zone. These are actually managed using Genetec Security Center and their intelligent mobility platform. But this platform also pulls in all the travel time data, and we've been using the detection data from these travel time sensors in a unique way. And what we're able to do with the detection, the change in the detection rate or the quantity of detections, we're able to estimate the change in overall volume on the roadway. And we're providing this to Mosaic and Metrolinx in order to allow them to extend construction times and allow longer lane closures than was normally possible. And so this has been fairly interesting. They've actually accelerated their work schedule significantly because of this, and it allows them to just get more work done in less time. And it's just a very good example of data-driven decision-making. So we're happy to be a part of that. And we've actually started providing weekly reports to them for this purpose. Although if you see in the data there, it does seem like things are starting to get back to normal. So I don't know that it's going to be applicable for much longer. And so that's it. Like I said, short and sweet. And thank you for attending. This was an interesting experience for us. In fact, it was the first survey we've done of this kind. But we learned a lot of interesting things and had some good conversations along the way. So I hope you found this information useful, and we have about 5 or 10 minutes left for any questions you might have. And you also have our email addresses here. You can email us any questions privately after this if you'd like as well. And so you can throw questions in the chat or into the questions, and we'll see what's there. No, I'm not seeing much. Okay, well then I guess we'll shut it down there. Again, you have our email here. Feel free to email us any questions you have. We will be sharing the results of this survey, as well as a link to a recording of the webinar. As well, and our next webinar is next month on August 9th, which is going to focus around pedestrian safety and the evolution of RFBs and how they're being deployed over the past few years in Canada. So we'll hope you'll join us for that one, and there'll be a link in that email we sent tomorrow. But thanks very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Michael, Stephanie has asked a question. I'm going to answer that.
Oh, okay.
She has asked, did you get more information on why manual counts were so high? Stephanie, manual counts was, let me go to that page first. So, on the presentation. So if you look at the data, about 6 towns mentioned that they still do a lot of manual counts. Overall, we didn't really investigate why the manual counts was very high, but we realized in our post-survey analysis that most of these towns were pretty small. Some of them used radars, but they still depended on a manual count agency or a separate agency to do this manual count for them, so that they can get a very reliable report. Because even if they have the radar, they were not sure how to analyze this data and how to present this data to somebody else. So that is a possible reason, but everybody would have a different reason. I can't really generalize it. I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Thanks, Ajay. Well, that looks like it. So thanks, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you. Bye.